I am so honored. I literally said to myself, like, I really must be doing something right if Hallease wants to interview for this, because you have some heavy hitters on this podcast. And I'm like, wow. This was honestly actually affirmation. So I do not take this lightly.
Can you kind of, tell us a bit, who is Bria?
Yes.
Who is Bria?
Who is me? My name is Bria Woods. I am, wow. Such a hard question. Because it's like, who am I today?
See, I love that. Who are you today?
Who am I today?
I'm just trying to be somebody. So make a way, make a way, make a way. I'm just trying to be somebody.
Hey everyone, it's me, Hallease, endeavoring to persevere as always, and back with another Trying to Be Somebody video podcast. I am so excited to have Bria Woods on the podcast today. She's this little ball of chaotic, good energy. Truly. She is a photojournalist based here in San Antonio, Texas. I actually got to meet her and get to know her through her Herstory Project, which we'll talk about in this episode. I just thought it was so fascinating having her contact me to be a part of this in such a way that was just chaotic. You know, she just kind of showed up to the office that I work out of and was like, hey, I'm doing this thing where I photograph women, you know, on film. And then I have them do this voiceovers and then we're going to have an exhibition. And I don't know, man, can you be in it? You know? And I was just like, yeah, sure. And getting to see how she went from extremely rough ideation to then she's premiering the project and having an event at the Impact Guild. For me, I had never been privy to that process of going from ideation to exhibition. And so I wanted to have her on to just talk about that. But before we get into the convo, a quick word from our sponsor for today, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with over 30,000 classes available to you for discovering your creativity or finding it if you've lost it. I love teaching on the Skillshare platform. In fact, I have a few classes on there. But keeping up with the theme of photojournalism and catching a moment, I wanted to tell y'all about Andre Wagner's class, which is street and documentary photography. It is such a good class. It follows him walking New York as he takes street photography of people. And he gives these really tangible tips through the process about how he walks against the grain of people that are walking on the sidewalk and kind of like stays in the crowd, how he keeps his camera out, where he keeps it placed so he can just quickly come up, capture a moment and keep going. I've had so much fun watching this class. I really enjoy the process of seeing other artists work and just seeing him explain his attention to detail and just his eye of spotting different moments. Even there's a moment in the intro where this older couple asks him a question for directions or something like that, and he quickly just snap, and you see the photo and you're just like, what? How did you, what? So I love his class. Definitely check it out on Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use either my code or the link in my description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So definitely check out his class if you want to. I just think it's a neat watch. It's a neat class, like seriously. And with that, let's get into this conversation with Bria.
Hello.
Hello. All right.
I am a storyteller. I am currently working very heavily in the photography medium, also radio. I'm dabbling more in-person exhibitions now and installation work, which is really such a huge dream come true and a huge milestone for me. My background is in communication and broadcast journalism. I work full-time as a photojournalist with a local publication in San Antonio. I also have my own photography practice on the side.
Nice. See, yeah, multifaceted artistry there. So yeah. I heard, so the way you pay your bills is working for the local publication here in San Antonio.
Yes.
Then you're also doing installation shows.
Yes.
You also have your photography business.
Yes.
Then you're also in radio, which I just found out about as well. I had no
Yes.
idea you were doing radio things. Like,
Yes.
what?
Well, actually, with KRTU, the radio station, I'm not getting paid to do that. But the photojournalism, my photography business, and selling my artwork is what is paying the bills right now.
Photography for me was always more of like a means to an end to
Mhm.
get to video.
Mhm.
So generally speaking, when you learn video production in like the academia sense, they teach you photography first. So it's like, because video's
Mhm.
moving pictures, right? So
Right.
you need to learn how to take stagnant pictures and then you move to moving pictures.
Right.
But one thing, I think one of the main reasons I never really pursued photography, even though it was something I had learned, was because I never quite understood how to make a living doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So can you
And
talk through some of your experience with photography? Because it seems to be your main sort of chosen medium for your artistry.
yes. And I do think it is very important to acknowledge how much the photography industry has changed and how people value photography as a service and as a product compared to when we were coming up and going through school. Because when I was in middle school, high school, it was still a means to an end, for newspaper or yearbook class. Okay, we're documenting these stories so they be published. But I don't think it ever crossed my mind when I was learning about photography in high school that someone could pay me to just take photos of them, and also Instagram was barely a thing. So this idea of just creating content was only just starting to kind of whisper into the atmosphere, into the online atmosphere. And so I think with the advent of social media and this idea of content creation and content production, our view and the importance that we put on image making has completely changed because it's no longer just for news or just for the fashion industry or just for big ads. It can also be for a local business. It could also just be because you're turning 25 this year and you want to do a photo shoot, So I think coming through that is also what shifted my mind to realize, oh, this can be a product. This can be a service. And I'm just now getting to the point where I'm starting to say, well, maybe I don't want to do birthday shoots all the time. Maybe I also want to work with organizations or nonprofits for certain, hard news campaigns or things that have a bit of a bite to it. And I think that is also influenced by me now working full time in photojournalism and just being exposed to so many stories that need to be told. And journalism is my first love. So I think I always kind of lean towards more documentary style. But I have dabbled in fashion photography, street photography, but it can still be challenging to find a way to monetize and make it sustainable and something you could live off of full time without my full-time job as a staff photographer with a publication. I can confidently say that I would not be able to live off of just my side business alone. Granted, because I am working full-time, I'm not dedicating the same amount of hours to my photography business because I need to sleep and try to be a human being. But it's risky. I have friends, even still, I'm part of Black Women Photographers, which I know you know of. You were interviewed. You did a talk with us last year. Black Women Photographers. And so every now and then, I'll see some of the women in that group say, all right, guys, just finished like my first 6 months as a full-time. And the harsh reality is it can be up, it can be down. Some months you're making profit, some months you're barely scraping 2 pennies together. And I think that's the kind of, and especially since the industry, I don't want to say is so saturated, but the average person knows a couple of photographers that they could call on to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious to know, where do you see yourself in your career right now? Would you say that and where do you kind of, I guess, want to go? Like, what will be the level of success for you?
Success for me would look like having my own studio practice and really living off of exhibitions, selling work, talks, maybe even being a professor somewhere, doing a bit of academia. I absolutely love what I do, and I would like the freedom to be able to do it on a freelance or self-employed level at some point. And so that to me would be the moment where I'd say I can now stand on my own 2 feet as a creator, as a storyteller, as a journalist, to be able to have these relationships with publications, to still do freelance, but also to say, I just want to take the next 5 months and pour into this new solo show.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm not going to go into financial ruin during those 5 months, you know?
Yeah.
That
Okay.
would be my mark of success. And the thing is, you know, now that because of social media and because there are so many people breaking through these barriers, there are women photographers who are doing it and who I look up to. And I'm like, okay, well, I can look at their journey, and not to say that I have to do exactly what they did, but I can look at some of the steps that they take, how they run their business, how they approach their practice, and kind of model my steps after that.
Yeah.
Of course, still honoring my own journey and the unique paths that I might have to get me there. But I know that it's possible, and that's what really keeps that fire alive.
Yeah. I feel like so many people forget how valuable just having a framework of seeing someone else go through it and do it can add to you. Like,
Yeah.
I remember when I first came out of film school, I was just like, I have no idea what to do next now, because I can't really look to my left or right or see anyone in my socioeconomic state /
Right.
Black /
Right.
female, you know, all the things. I
Yeah.
can't really see anybody around me who
Yeah.
I could like at least glean an idea of what success looks like for someone like me
Right.
in film. And of course, now, to your point, it is amazing because, yeah, we've got the Issa Raes of the world. We've
Right.
got, you know, all these other women, the Quintas of the world who have kind of like figured something out using multiple sources and all of that. I'm curious to know, actually, what are some of your photography like inspirations that you're using to kind of pave your path?
Yes. So India Beale is a huge inspiration to me. She graduated from the Yale School of Art, and she focused a lot of her work in communities and just being out on the street. I'll never forget. So she did a talk with Black women photographers last year as well. And she was sharing with us how she literally took this 4x5 camera into the hood. And she was just going up to people who were just kind of loitering around on street corners and was like, can I take your picture? And at first they were like, no, lady, like, what are you doing around here with that? What are you talking about? You know what I mean? And she said, so eventually she kept nudging them, kept working with them. And I remember she said there was one guy who finally said, yes, yeah, sure, go ahead, whatever. So she gets behind the camera, puts the hood over her head, snaps the photo, and she's like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. She goes, she develops the photo, she makes the print, and she brings it back to him. And it created this connection because that was the first time probably anyone had ever invested in him enough to say, your likeness, your existence is worth capturing and cherishing and freezing in time. But she didn't just take it and run away. She brought it back to him to involve him in this process. That is her whole thing. That is so consistent through all her work. She likes to involve the participant and the audience. It's all, you become one almost. The audience is now also the participant in her work. And so she's she's a huge inspiration for me, not only as a Black woman, but also in terms of the kind of work that I want to be creating. I want to be making interactive work that challenges your thinking, that makes you really look inward and say, why do I think that? Why do I behave that way? She did another project where she involved some of her white colleagues who would always comment on her hairstyles and had them get similar hairstyles. And then she photographed them. So you see these, you know, middle-aged white ladies with cornrows and box braids and finger waves, you know what I mean? And then she photographs them and they look like work portraits, you know, like when you get your work headshot.
Yeah.
You know, and it not only stimulated a conversation with the women who participated, but also now as the viewer, we're looking at them, looking at themselves, and probably wondering like, so how does it feel? You know what I mean? Now, when you come to work looking like that and people are going to say, oh, why is your hair different, Karen? You know what I mean? Which is what you do to India all the time when she changes her hair. And so it gets you thinking about things that maybe you normally wouldn't.
Hey, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conversation with Bria. A few announcements. If you've been here before, you know the drill. If you're new here, stick around. If you're watching this video podcast on YouTube, please make sure to like it and engage down below in the comments. That really helps algorithmically, so that way more people can discover this podcast and I can stay gainfully employed. Likewise, if you're watching or listening to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, consider rating it over there. 5 stars is obviously preferred, but I love constructive criticism just as much as the next person, so give us a rating. It'll really help us out as well. Again, your girl trying to stay employed. Amen. If you want to take things a step further, consider joining the Patreon, patreon.com/Hallease. There you get early access to these podcast episodes, as well as private weekly vlogs from me and early access to all the content that I'm creating, not just here on this platform, but everywhere in between, all over. A big shout out to our Patreon producers, who I consider early investors of this channel and this podcast. And with that, let's get back to Bria.
I also really admire the work and practice of Natasha Caruana. Apologies if I'm pronouncing her name incorrectly. But she's based in England, and she lives 100% off of her work. She does exhibitions internationally, and she's so transparent about how she funds her work, about how she even keeps her books, about how she writes her ideas out. She's really big on encouraging artists to just play. Just play. No outcome, no goals, just vibes. There has to be a sense of play and freedom and discovery so that your brain can release the pressure of trying to make something great. And she also has a business called Work, Show, Grow, which puts on different workshops, like intensive workshops. For example, they're doing one now called the Money Workshop. So it's like a 4-week course where you learn how to write grants, how to clean up your CV, how to make a budget sheet, how to make a budget proposal, how to change your language, how to write emails, all these different details. So she's very much not only just about the actual creation of her work, which is very poignant, but also about education and helping other photographers behind her. Especially she puts a premium on working with female photographers and artists on how to bring them up and share the things that she's learned so that others can avoid common pitfalls and mistakes, and we can kind of bridge that gap. As we all know, women are still underrepresented in every medium in the art world. So
yeah,
we love it here.
I want to get into your project, the Herstory Project. Can you talk a bit about how this project came along and what your thought process was behind it?
Yes. So it was January 7th, 2021. I was sitting in this same chair behind me, and I was on the phone with a friend, and I said, I want to do something for Black History Month. Maybe a photography project, maybe an audio project. And so after, I don't know, maybe an hour of kind of spitballing and throwing ideas out, pretty much the iteration of the Herstory Project that I came up with that night is what we see now. So the Herstory Project is a portrait and audio storytelling project that seeks to capture personal histories and images of women in San Antonio who I feel like are shaping the city for the better. So once I take each woman's portrait, then I also ask them to answer the same question. And so that becomes the audio portion, which I turned into a podcast, essentially. And each episode is each woman answering that question. For me, the Herstory Project, I wanted to be a living resource for not only students and children, but anyone in our community who wants to know more about the individuals and particularly the women who are shaping our community. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of women role models. I didn't know there were women in photojournalism or rocket science or biomedical research. I just didn't have any particular name or figure to look at. And so I don't want young girls or young children today to look at their womanhood as a limitation. I want them to see it as a passport, because that is exactly what it is. We are not doing things despite being a woman. It is because we are women and the women that we come from that we are able to achieve these great things and have these opportunities and break through these barriers. And that's what I want people to look at the Herstory Project. I want people to look at, to look at you guys and hear your story and see a bit of themselves in that, and also see what the next generation can be. And also, I think there's a lot of power in seeing that these are local people. They're not out of reach. Someone who is going to a school on the West Side, maybe one day they'll run into you at HEB and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's Hallease from the Herstory Project. You know what I mean? Like, here she is in the flesh. You know, and there's something really special about that, because I remember when I was in college, I was going through a period where I was so hungry to understand how the people who I looked up to made it and what their journey was and how do I achieve success. But usually these were people that were not anywhere in my circle of influence or my realm. They were always out there somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And always felt inaccessible in that way. And so the reason why I'm focusing hyper local is because there is something really cool to know that not only are they alive now, like we're not talking about people in the past tense, but they're around you. You can see them, you can meet them, you can talk to them. And that makes history come alive. This is living history. Or herstory, I guess I should say. And there's so much power in people using their own voice, which is also why I included the audio portion. Also because I love radio and I love voice and I love listening to people's voices. But now, no one could ever say 100 years from now that you are not the founder of StumbleWell. That you have said these things, this is documented, this is etched into history. And the whole point of this is I want people to recognize the value in their own personal history.
Oh, yeah.
In their own personal narratives, There's
so much value in documentation, especially for people of color, because, if you look through history, we don't really get to document our own stories and all of that.
So for each group, I call them chapters. So far, I have 2 chapters of the Herstory Project. The first chapter was launched on February 5th. 2021. So in less than a month. So I first had the idea on January 7th and it was hanging at the Impact Guild by February 5th.
Y'all, when I tell you I was pressed just watching her get through this project. I was like, I'm stressed on your behalf.
I'm not sure what kind of crazy juice I was consuming at the time, but it was very potent because in less than a month, I had not only come up with the idea, but had reached out to 15 of the city's busiest women and said, hey, hi, do you want to meet me at the Sunken Gardens to take a photo? And then can you send me a recording of you answering this question by this date? Thanks. And surprisingly, they all said yes.
Yeah.
And I remember staying up so late on certain nights trying to print the images, trying to figure out how am I going to display this. I eventually landed on using Medium as the kind of digital exhibition space. So on Medium, I have each woman's name, their portrait, their bio, and their audio. And the idea here is that as you're looking at their portrait, you can click play on the audio, and it's like they're talking to you while you're looking at their portrait. And then Mark Menjivar, who you just interviewed for this podcast as well, connected me with Sarah Woolsey at the Impact Guild. And she welcomed me with open arms to do an in-person exhibition in that space. And so that was my first time ever printing more than like 2 or 3 images for a show at like Brick or something. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to fill all this wall space. And Javi, who used to work at Digital Pro Lab, actually came out to the Impact Guild and helped me measure the wall, helped me think about the layout. I had never done this before, ever.
Yeah.
Mark Menjivar actually donated 15 photo frames to me because framing can be a huge expense. So to date, I have funded this project out of pocket.
Well, that was going to be my next question. How, if you don't mind sharing that part.
Obviously.
How much was this? Because people don't talk about exhibitions and like just the nuts and bolts. Because I even hear you saying like, we're going to try to double back on it if I remember, but talking about like measuring walls and then thinking about prints and like all this kind of stuff and then buying frames. Like, yo.
There's so much math and photography So if you're trying to be an artist because you're not good at math, keep
Wrong.
it pushing because you're going to have to do math at every step of the way. Even just like when you're actually taking the images and you're thinking, okay, if my aperture is this and my ISO needs to be this and my shutter speed is this, and you know what I mean? You're thinking about this exposure triangle in your mind and thinking about these numbers. And then when you're editing and you're thinking about the value of the exposure and the shadows and the contrast, and even when you're printing, do you want a 1/4 inch border? Do you want a full inch border? How's that going to fit with your mat? Are you matting it? If so, how thick do you want it to be? How thick is your frame? You know, so there's so much. And then when you're hanging it on the wall, you know, I even learned that the standard eye height, I think, is 52 inches off the floor. Never knew that. And so you're thinking, how far up is it going to be? How far apart is each image going to be? How are you going to keep that consistent?
Yeah.
And I was working in a space that is not a like purpose-built gallery space. So,
Right.
you know, there are not people with, you know, curation degrees in the Impact Guild that are ready to, you know, help me think through this. And so it was like my first time thinking through it in a unique space. And in addition to that, again, I was coming out of pocket with everything, you know, because of the generosity of Mark. Thankfully, I did not have to come out of pocket for the frames, but the printing, thankfully, Digital Pro Lab has a professional service so that it'll be a little bit more discounted, especially if you're doing a lot of images. So when I printed the images at Digital Pro Lab for the Pro Luster, I went with kind of a more basic paper to keep it a little bit more on the affordable side. And so for 10 by 13, that was $7.95 each, which was before taxes about $120. And then from there, I did 2 events. That's where the real money came into play, was these events. So for the Joy chapter, I did a virtual event. So I was able to save on that, but I did collaborate with 2 people who helped me stream, which was so helpful. And then for the Legacy chapter, which really quickly, the Legacy chapter, I just asked each woman to answer the question, if you could sit down with your great grandmother, what would you want her to know about your life and how that compares to her life? And if you could sit down with your great granddaughter, what do you want your legacy to be in her eyes? And that was the chapter that you were.
Yeah, that I was in. And I was like, whew, that's a question.
Right.
I had to meditate on it before I sent you my audio. I was like, dang, what do I want?
That's what I want to go for with these. I want these questions to give pause and really stir a conversation on not only on the individual level, but also on the community level, which is a huge part of why I created that project. And then so for that in-person event that we did in August, we're talking well over 1,000, probably more like 1,500, because I had t-shirts made.
Right, you did.
Yeah. We got personalized cookies.
Yes, y'all did.
I had a decorator. What else did we have? And then again, printing costs all over again for this new chapter.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty penny, and again, all out of pocket. I did apply for some grants last year, but of course, you know, you got to keep applying and keep applying. I didn't get them the first time, but I'm going to keep applying for grants and looking for opportunities to find funding to make this work. I believe that it is something. I believe that at this point, I've been able to prove the concept, and it's something that the community values. It's just about finding that right grant or funding opportunity that really sees the value and is like, yeah, here's a check. Please continue.
I think for me, it was really interesting to see you go through that process too, because I had never been in a space where I could actually see an artist like on the ground, have a concept, execute it, and then present it to in an exhibition style. And so for me, it was just why I wanted to have you on. I was just like, oh, I'm actually getting to see what this is. And oh, it is like being essentially a equivalent to a producer like a video producer, like you're, you know, whether your budget's $10 or a couple $1,000s, 5 figures, 6 figures, so on and so forth, you like are scrapping to just like figure it out. And I love the idea of that, like I love that you mentioned you're using this language that I think a lot of people don't actually learn until they start doing this. Talking about even the way you talked about the Impact Guild. Like, so for those y'all who don't know, the Impact Guild is a co-working space in San Antonio. And yeah, just hearing the way you described, even just like thinking about it, you know, like, oh yeah, I've never exhibited in this kind of space. I've never worked with a curator before, or like someone who is like well-versed in curation to know about heights and widths and all these things. And I, like, as you were saying that, I thought to myself, the Getty probably got some folks there that, you know, got all these degrees and all sorts of how to present information to the people on a wall stuff.
Literally.
You know?
Yeah.
That is like, thought, like, oh yeah, wherever, it all is kind of like at a certain height and
that's
like
a real
spaced a certain way.
Like someone really gets paid to go up to some white walls and be able to know exactly how it should be displayed. And it's like, you never think about that until now you're having to make those decisions. I'm like, well, I don't know. That's part of the reason why I actually went with the popcorn style. So if you remember, on that one wall, the main wall in the Impact Guild, they are not in a straight line. I had it just kind of popcorn on the wall because I was like, see, what we're not going to do is pull out a ruler right now. I'm not for this right now. So I said, also, I like to think of myself as an eclectic person. And so I thought it might make it more visually interesting to have it kind of like this map, you know, on the wall instead of just this uniform row, almost like, I don't know, work headshots or something in the break room or whatever. So I thought maybe that would also have more visual interest, but it was also very much influenced by the fact that I don't like doing that. I'm love that. Keeping it a buck, you know?
Wow. Yeah. And so actually, I'm just curious more now. Where does the project live right now, aside from digitally? And obviously everyone in the show notes, I'll link to it so you can check it out because it is really cool. But where does it currently live right now physically, if anywhere?
In my bedroom.
Okay. I was just curious.
So after the 2 runs at the Impact Guild, the Legacy chapter also was hanging at Squeezers for a month. And then once I took it down from there, I haven't put it back up yet. I am working on the next chapter. And so I'm hoping to be able to exhibit that. If not at the Impact Guild, then maybe if there's somewhere else in town that would love to have me in the project. But that's where my attention has been focused right now, is preparing for the next chapter.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You were definitely not in the beginnings of your career. I don't feel like you are. From where I sit watching you, I don't feel like you are. But you're obviously not where you want to be completely. What are some things, because I feel like you're somewhere in the mazy part, right now, which I feel like we all more or less are, but like mazy part. What are some things that you wish you had started doing like faster with your just photography and just your career thus far? You know what I mean?
Yes. Creating a better communication infrastructure. Ooh. Meaning not trying to book clients through the DMs or even text message. Like really, I prefer people to email me. Even now, I'm still trying to be disciplined enough to use a CRM. I have a HoneyBook subscription that I'm not using because I'm just won't sit down and figure it out. So as you said, like I am in that mazy part where I'm starting to understand what can help me get there. And it's just about really being disciplined to implement it and understand it. That's one thing. Another thing I would say is I'm so grateful. I finally have someone in my life who, when I'm trying to figure out how to price something, I can call him up and we can talk actual numbers. Because for the longest time, I was just like, $100?
Oh, girl, no.
Sounds like money. You know what I mean? And so, in addition to having garnered more experience and publishing credits now, I also have a better understanding of how to value certain services and how to communicate that value. And that is something that if I could dial back the clock, I wish I could have had that information at least 4 years ago.
And that's hard, getting to that point where you can feel just so confident in what you're asking, the number you're asking, that if they say, well, no, then it's like, then that wasn't for me. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that's such a, getting to that point in your career is like scary sauce.
I can say, so just last week, someone reached out to me. They want to do an event in Austin. And so I sent them my rate. And it was the first time that I sent someone my rate without having to call my mentor first and without toiling in my head about, oh, should I lower it just a wee bit? You know, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be fine. I was like, no, this is my rate. Get back. You know, I look forward to hearing from you. You know, I had a bit of a wee bit of a panic after I sent it. And I was like, oh my God. But I've also learned that truly when you get better at communicating the value of what you create, the right people who do have the funds will find you and they will gladly write that check. And I'd say towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I have had that experience and now know what it feels like for that to be an easy conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be a bunch of back and forth. I should never have to be defending my work, because if you found me and you've reached out to me, I'm assuming you're familiar with my work.
Yeah.
And it's something that you feel is worth paying for. So now that I'm telling you what it costs, I've now had the experience where, you know, the right clients, you know, it's just a good match. And they're like, oh, great. Absolutely. What's your banking information? You know, how do you want to get paid? And I was like,
Yeah.
what? That was so easy. More of this, please.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Once you know what it feels like, it gets a little bit easier to just stand firm on the value of your work.
How have you been searching for grants? Because I've had to write grants, apply for grants. How has that process been going for you? Do you have any potential tips for the community? Because I feel like a lot of people, especially Black people specifically, who are artists, they don't actually realize that there is a ton of money out there. You just have to have the language to like apply for it and / find it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Especially in the social activist art space, which I feel like your piece definitely fits into that as well. So
absolutely.
How's it going for you?
I still have a lot to learn. I'll be transparent because obviously, you know, I have not received any of the grants that I've applied for. And I know now that I think my weak spots are one, the budget aspect.
Okay.
I think I was a little too generic in my breakdown of what the money would be used for or what actually costs money. I think in one of my grant applications, I just said printing, framing, exhibiting, but did not. I did not understand that they probably want they want the actual printing on this paper that costs $7.95 per image, and framing that's going to cost, you know, $30 per image, whatever it is. And so I'm still getting better at really understanding and asking, okay, what does it really cost? Forget about what I can afford, assuming that I'm spending someone else's money.
Right.
What does it cost to create the Herstory Project the way I really want it to look?
Yeah.
And what does that breakdown look like? And so that's something that I started working on at the beginning of this year, was making an actual cost breakdown of every little detail I can think of, putting it into a spreadsheet. And like you said, even embracing the truth that there is money out there and that I am deserving of some of it.
Yeah.
You know? And that's still so hard to say. I think part of me still thinks there's a difference between the artists out there and the artists in here. And realizing that if you really believe in what you're doing and you understand and you can communicate that in a way to help other people see the value of what you're doing, then the money is there. The money is there. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now, is learning how to really share that narrative.
Yeah.
But also provide the nuts and bolts of where their dollars would be going.
Yeah. I find that it's really interesting when because like I said, I've applied to grants, gotten a couple. And I found the difference between me and someone else who had applied was literally that I knew how to artistically explain, like get it out of my head and onto a piece of paper, what's going to happen and the social impact that thing can have and like all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, on the sort of, even though it's a grant, so it's not about making money, it's about money needs to be spent. You know, that's where the grantees are saying, like, we need to hit quotas of getting rid of the money,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
to fund the arts.
Right.
And so on their side, it's not that it's not a business, but they just, yeah, like you said, they really do want to see that by showing those line items of everything you're going to spend, it signals to them that you've thought it through.
Right.
That this really is a fully fleshed out, like you really, you know how you see shows or like artists and they'll just be like, well, you know, we're just going to like
right.
do stuff.
Right.
And it's like,
feel
that,
it.
yeah.
We're just going to feel the energy.
We're
Like,
just
if
gonna,
it's not good vibes, we're not
feel
doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That stresses grantees out.
And I realize that now. And I think that's also the key thing that I realized, is that to go from passion project, which is how it started a year ago, to actual viable, self-sustaining project.
Yeah.
You know, you really have to be serious about the business and financial aspect of it. And that's where I'm transitioning, and just accepting that I can go and get it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so unfortunate, but so real, how much of being an artist is really just hyping yourself up and getting out of your own head. But this project was also a huge milestone for me, because it was one of the first times that I actually said yes to an idea without over analyzing it, over editing it, and just kept saying yes each step of the way, and said, what if I just said yes and just let it happen?
Yeah.
What would happen? And now I know, you know. And so now that I've been able to put it out there, I realize, okay, there's definitely value in continuing with this. But now I just need to make it more sustainable.
We keep saying like the business side, but don't think about it. It's not about in terms of like, this needs to make money. It's really
Right.
just like, we need to see like what the physical good is that is presented and the cost of that physical good, even though there's like an intangible worth to the finished product that can never be quantified, because it's art, because it exists because it's meant to.
Right.
But there should be like, yeah, the tangible understanding of how much it costs to bring this intangible to existence.
Exactly. That's where I'm at right now, kind of in that maze aspect of my journey, is understanding how to quantify that.
I feel like as artists, people always say like, don't let other people define you, or don't let people define what your worth is and all that kind of stuff. And like, don't. But at the same time,
right. At the same time, I'm still trying to get paid, and like,
yeah.
You know, I'm not trying to go into debt over this project.
Right.
You know, I have personal financial goals outside of this, you know? So I think we also need to recognize that a lot of art is still rooted in colonial privilege practices.
Oh, girl.
That, you know, to apply for some of these detailed grants, you need the luxury of time.
Oh, speak.
Which is not something that a lot of artists of color have, because we are maybe doing this on the side, or balancing family, or balancing, you know, some people are still in school or what have you. So to sit down and work on a multi-page application that's asking for an essay dang near with every question, I mean, that in and of itself is a huge barrier to entry, which keeps artists of color from ever even being within reach of these funds. And so I know that there are some grants out there that are doing more, you know, lesser involved grant applications, and making it a little bit easier and less bureaucratic to apply. And then from there, it's just getting the word out. But that's something I think about a lot, is we have to remember that a lot of the same methods that we're trying to use were not necessarily designed for people like you and I. And that's something that I think about a lot. Not that I'm using that as an excuse. Like I'm still going to get this bag. I still need to give you points.
No,
but
yeah.
just
No.
yeah.
I think that's a really good point. If anything, I think the thing that actually freaks me out the further along in my career I get is like acknowledging to myself when I am applying for these things, and there's this whole grueling process. And I'm like, wow. And I've had multiple instances where that's happened now, where I was just like, wow, I have the time to sit here and fill this out and like flesh out my ideas. My creative capital application, by the way, I spent like 2 months on that. Yeah. Like revamping, coming back to it, but I would need to, go make videos and do my job.
Right.
And then come back to it, do more stuff. And it was like, but I had the time. I did.
Yeah.
But it was just like,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, how do, people of color make this happen,
Right.
And it also was, for me, it was very like, wow, I've hit a certain level of my career and can acknowledge that like I have some privilege in me that I can actually sit here and do this thing. Like I've had that happen to me many times so far in my career. And I'm just like, I usually just go to call my mom and dad. I'm like, guys, I love y'all so much. Thank you. Thank you, guys. The other thing I want to say though, just because grants definitely got me through year one of the Panini Press for sure. I would not have survived financially without grants. I would not have survived financially without grants if I had not. I'm gonna say that again for the people in the back. But something I will say that I think people forget is like there's so much SEO around grant searching that the biggest thing I always tell people is shorten the pool, make the pool of what you're applying for really small. So start hyper local. So like for you, for example, I would first search City of San Antonio's art grants, which I know there are a ton because I just missed the cutoff because I would have applied for some of them for some of my stuff.
That's a good idea. So starting
super
local. Yeah.
And I know San Antonio actually does have, San Antonio values the arts pretty well. There's a lot of grants. And so, especially to the filmmakers out there, just because it looks like an arts grant doesn't necessarily mean you can't use it for your filmmaking. Apply. They use language that is a bit dated generally because they are more used to what is considered like more traditional forms of artistry, like photography, like painting, like sculpture and stuff. But like film and video is starting to get understood to be included. They just don't change the language. So one, that. Two, start small. So start like in your city, San Antonio. So that was what I did first. Started San Antonio. And then I was like, all right, I qualify for these. I don't. Cool. Then I stretched it out. Bexar County, the county that my city's in. Then I stretched it out. State of Texas. Then stretched it out. Okay, now United States. Because it's, if you start small, less pool of people that you're competing against to get the grant.
That makes a ton of sense.
Lean into your identities. Okay.
Yeah.
Especially with the state of the country, a lot of grantors, the people with the money that be
people with the deep pockets
are acknowledging, like we've been discussing, the struggles for Black artists. So now is not the time to hide your identities. I really do believe that now is the time to lean into them and use those search terms to find the money as well. That has helped me a lot as well. And then what was the other thing? There's something else I tell people all the time. Get on that newsletter grind, like for real.
I'm finna sign up for that immediately.
Those are my thoughts that I just wanted to share to people. Just like, y'all, the money it really is out there. Like, and be confident in yourself and learn to express your ideas as succinctly and like communicatively as possible. And I just feel like it'll happen for all of you. I want everyone to find whatever level of success they define, like wherever they define it. I just want everyone to get there because there's enough space for everyone for wherever you want to be, Absolutely.
I
just want everyone to be okay.
Right? We just want everybody to win.
I just want everybody to win.
Another thing I want to drive home is like, I do very much feel that I don't know if I'm still emerging, but I definitely wouldn't say that I have arrived to like the full breadth of where I'd like my career to be as an artist and as a storyteller. But I definitely feel like I'm on the right track, which I don't think we give enough credit to being on the right track.
Ooh, yeah.
That is something that I really take a lot of joy in right now, is knowing that I am where I want to be. I'm learning so much every day. I'm surrounded by people who not only mentor me, they support me, they're invested in my growth and my development. And I think there's no better place to be. And eventually the fruit of that will continue to bloom. But it's just right now, I feel like I'm very much in fertile soil, letting the roots grow deep. And like I said, a lot of it is just getting out of my head, being disciplined, showing up, and not being afraid to look clueless. You know?
That's true. I also feel like a lot of people think, so don't get me wrong, obviously if the goal for you, myself, anyone is, if the goal is to leave the 9 to 5, cool, go for it. But I also think that you learn so much at those different 9 to 5s. Like, I'm sure being at the paper where you're at is honing a certain skill in you that you may not even realize you will need potentially
100%.
later on. Like, I look back, I used to work at J. Crew in retail, and I use some of those skills still now, as I ain't been done retail in a minute, but like, you know, I use some of the skills I worked at SeaWorld. So I don't know.
Building a house. The house can't be all brick. You need wood somewhere. You need glass somewhere. You need stucco somewhere. You need insulation somewhere. It can't be all one thing. So I don't want to build the house of my career with all one material.
I love that.
So I'm grateful, like you said, I'm so grateful for the full-time position I have right now. Also, because it is still in photography, I have my camera in my hand every day. You know, I'm adding to my portfolio and expanding my knowledge every single day. And that in and of itself is invaluable. Even if I never do another, you know, creative shoot again, just even what I'm curating through my job is immensely important. And then also, you know, I am that, and because that supports me financially, I do still have the ability to carve out a bit of time on the side to explore some of my passion projects. And so I actually feel like I'm in a sweet spot right now. And I certainly don't feel pressure to, you know, go full-time creative by any certain point. I'd say my focus now is more on building those building the infrastructure, building the discipline, and creating the best opportunity for myself to succeed.
Yeah. I love that you have that, like, that understanding of just where, like, you are right where you should be. You know what I mean? Because so many people see life as like, I need to get to there. Like it's a race, like it's a finish line, I guess. But I just like that you're at a space where you can see, like, I am actively doing what my goal in life is.
Yes.
And like, I'm growing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know. It's just beautiful to see. That's all.
Thank you.
You're a joy. You're a joy.
Thank you.
Truly. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Bria. Again, for me, I think talking to her, it really solidified that idea of you just got to start. And I feel like having the conversation with Bria just really solidified that for me. I feel like sometimes I do forget that as well. So I hope this conversation helped. Again, let me know in the comments below if it did. And we have one more episode for season 1, and then we're going to take a break, revamp, and figure out what we're doing for season 2. But I am so excited to bring the last episode to you because I think I tend to be glass half full all the time as a content creator and a video producer and a digital storyteller. I tend to be a glass half full kind of person. That's just the vibe that I give. But I also think it's good to have other perspectives. Okay? We need that. And so our next guest, I think, is someone who looks at a glass and says, that's not half full. It's not half empty. It's just a glass with water in it. And I am so excited to bring her to you, our last official episode for season 1. So stay tuned, comment below. I will see you when I see you.
I'm just trying to be somebody.